Is it me or does he sound dumb as hell? Like, what he mean? He asked him where he from, and he said Atlanta, Georgia. That's where he from, dummy. Atlanta, Georgia is in the United States of America, dummy. Like, what?
We have to explain this all the time, and y'all still don't get it.
Oh, so fabulous.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel once again. It's your girl Dumebi. If this is your first time coming across my channel, you're welcome. Please subscribe and join the big happy family. And if you are a returning subscriber, you guys, thanks for stopping by once again. It's so good to have you here. Welcome back. So today's video was something that I came across, and you guys, it was a video made by an African person who is British. I have to state the fact that he is British, and I'll let you guys know why. But let me just go right ahead and play his video.
Bro, I don't know if Americans are genuinely confused or they're just thick, because this blew my mind. And if you're not American, this will probably blow your mind too. So I'm from England, right? But most English people are usually white, just like Americans are usually white too, okay? Keep that in mind, this is very important. As you can see from looking at my skin, I am not just white, I have black in me, which means I come from African descent. To be more specific, Ghanaian descent. Keep this in mind. I was outside in America and I seen a fellow melanin brother. Now, when I'm looking at melanin people, I can usually tell what part of Africa you are from your features. And I saw this brother that I thought might have been Ghanaian too. Big up my Ghana brothers, by the way. But was I so wrong? So I proceeded to ask, yo bro, what part of Africa you from? He said, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I was like, oh word, but like, where are your parents from? Atlanta, Georgia. So what about your grandparent? Atlanta, Georgia. So my next question was, how are you black? There's a lot of black people in Atlanta, Georgia, son. So you're telling me that you're not from Africa, but your skin is saying otherwise? Yep, proud African American, straight out of Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. And before I could ask him any more questions, brother, I answered it for myself. These people genuinely think that African American is its own race. And this is actually deep, bro. These African Americans are children. Yes, you heard me right. So I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no such thing as African Americans. Our ancestors were just taken from Africa to America, brainwashed, and completely forgot where they came from. And that's the truth. So maybe go look at your history before saying I'm African American.
So now, when I watched that video, I was like, the amount of ignorance in that video, I don't think it came from a malicious place. He's just really ignorant, and he is so loud with his ignorance. Like, he's loud and wrong at the same time. Now, remember I said I was going to tell you guys why I had to emphasize on the fact that he is British. This is because I have seen takes like this on TikTok, on the internet, and it usually comes from black people that are in Europe. When you see a lot of these videos that are talking about African Americans and pointing out the differences, or making all these points that make you look as if they do not understand why African Americans are the way they are and have developed the kind of identity and culture that they have today, 9 times out of 10, it might be an African person, but it is always an African person that happens to be in Europe. Britain, especially, they are usually British. And if you think I'm joking, these videos, this one, and this one are examples. These are obviously people that are of African descent, yes, but they are living in Europe. They have been there for a while. You could even hear it in their accent that these are not people that are living in Africa, or they might not have even been born or even bred in Africa. So it is safe to say that there is definitely a mindset that some of these black British people have. Now, I know it's not going to be all of them, but there definitely seems to be a lot of them, because these people get on the internet and make these crazy videos from time to time. And you know what? Before I blab on, you guys know that a lot of people replied to him. So let me just go right ahead and play people's replies to his video.
How are you black? There's a lot of black people in Atlanta, Georgia, son. So you're telling me that
I understand why black Americans don't like black Brits. Like, I get it. At first, I wasn't even going to make a response to this. I thought it was clickbait. Like, any amount of Googling can tell you the answer to whatever he's saying. I feel like in secondary school, we all watched Roots. Like, I think we all know why black Americans identify with the city they're from and not some random African country. Like, we know, right? Black Brits really bring the vibes down sometimes. And, like, there be xenophobia on both sides. Like, we all say things about each other, but, like, black British people hey, black people have enough going on. There's enough issues that black people across the world have to deal with that don't have anything to do with country of origin, blah, blah, blah. Like, let's focus. Let's focus.
Bro, I don't know if Americans are genuinely confused or they're just thick, because this...
He goes on to say that if you're not American, you're going to be confused too. I'm not technically American, but I'm not confused at all. Like, I'm confused why this guy is confused. I'm like, do they teach people, like, a lot of English and European get on here and talk about how dumb Americans are. But a lot of the times they open their mouth and I wonder who's the dumb one. Because do they not teach them about slavery and the slave trade or anything? Because if you knew that, you wouldn't be confused. Black people from America, or African Americans, which you say don't exist, have been in this country for like 400 years. Okay? They're born in Atlanta, Georgia. Their mom was probably born in Atlanta, Georgia. Their grandmother was born in Atlanta, Georgia. Their grandmother's mother was born in... Basically, they could trace their ancestry in America back at least 400 years. So what do you mean they're not American? They're American. But they know that originally they were from Africa somewhere. One of their ancestors got jacked up and shipped over here as a slave, and that's where they originated. And they don't know where in Africa they're from. Why would they know that? Because during slavery, the slave masters made a concerted effort to cut them and strip them of that heritage. So none of them know where they originated unless they take a DNA test, and that's just guesswork. And a lot of the countries in Africa that exist now didn't exist back then either. So why do y'all expect black people born and raised in America to know exactly where they're from? Oh yeah, I'm from Ghana. Why would they know that? Okay, they wouldn't. And it seems weird to me that I was born in the Caribbean in Grenada. And basically it's the same story. I don't know exactly where my ancestry came from, but I know that I was born in Grenada. My mom was born in Grenada. Her mom was born in Grenada. Her mom's mom was born in Grenada. And we could trace this back at least 4, 5, 6 generations that we were born in Grenada. So we're good. So we say we're West Indian, we're Caribbean. That's our ethnicity. Because that's a culture, that's a separate culture. We were brought to this place and we created our own culture, our own traditions, our own stuff. So we're a separate ethnicity. Just the same with African Americans. They were forced into this country and they created their own culture, their own languages, their own traditions, and their own ethnicity. So even though I live in America now, I can't tell people I'm African American, because technically I'm not. Because African American is its own thing. It's its own ethnicity. They have their own history, their own kind of language, the foods they eat that are separate from Caribbeans, their own ethnicity. So yes, African American does exist. It's an ethnicity. Jamaicans, all the Caribbeans are in the same boat as African Americans, but y'all don't give them the same smoke. Why? That's what I want to know. And like literally, the whole thing was that whole video just upset me. Because y'all try to erase African Americans' history, their own struggles, and their own issues. Just for what? And purposely be dense.
Atlanta, Georgia. So what about your grandparent? Atlanta, Georgia.
This is why we're called African Americans. This is mine. These are all part of my heritage. How can I just claim one part of Africa? And that's not even determining down to what tribe my ancestors came from during that time. And I didn't even get to down what's below that too. That's just as much as a shit show as well. But if that's too hard to understand, here's a generational background of each generation and where they fall. See, there's a lot that go back really, really far. There's a lot that are closer. I can't say where they come from. I can't say which grandparent they fall into. I don't even know who half of my grandparents are past 1860. I always find it funny that people use things that came from African American culture but try and make fun of it at the same time.
From Atlanta, Georgia.
I don't know how much I got left in my body to explain this to y'all, but okay. And we have to explain this all the time, and y'all still don't get it. Nobody, no African American in their right mind is debating that we are or aren't African. Look at me. Look at my features. I mean, duh. Like, that's not up to debate. We know we African. We know we West and Central African. That's not up to debate. But what y'all struggle to understand is our genealogy, our DNA. It's very, very, very complex. And it's like some of y'all haven't even heard of the Atlantic slave trade. Like, at this point, y'all should have known about it by then, right? Like, but I'll buy it. We can trace our ancestry back to various tribes in West and Central Africa. That's not up to debate, okay? We are mixed up like a pot of gumbo. And that's just what it is. Being mixed, it don't have to mean racially. But we is mixed like a pot of gumbo. We have so many different white African ethnic tribes in us. We got some white European DNA in us. We got some, some of us mixed with the indigenous tribes in parts of the South, which means some of us may have indigenous American ancestry as well. I mean, you got Louisiana Creole people who are like really mixed up like gumbo, racially and ethnically. And then you got some people like the Gullah Geechee people who barely mixed up with certain folk, who barely mixed up with other races. Same thing for people in like places like deep in Mississippi, places like deep in Alabama. And when an African American tell you that they is from Mississippi, they from Atlanta, Georgia, they from Charleston, South Carolina, New York City, the Bronx, LA, whatever. Whenever they tell you that, that don't mean that they don't know where they come from. That's just means that is where that's what our culture is. That's where we from. It's just as valid as an Afro-Colombian saying they from Cartagena, or an Afro-Brazilian saying they from Bahia in Brazil. I just don't get why y'all make it seem like it's rocket science when trying to figure out African Americans. It's not hard. It is complex because so many of us, and the reason why we can't find our original tribes is because it's impossible, okay? And it's always going to be impossible. It's just like it is. It's just how it is. Why? Because so many of us were moved from different plantations to different plantations in the South. Some families were removed from each other. They took they children, they took they cousins, they uncles, separated them across various states. Some of us even, some of the trade even went from America, the South, to the Caribbean, to Latin America. It was all a bunch of moving around, so it's impossible for us to find our original tribe. And that's okay. That's okay. We created a new culture in America. We gave this country culture at this point. We brought so many things from Africa that now grow in America, like such as rice, such as watermelon, such as other things, okra. We gave that to America. So no, we're not lost people. Stop calling us lost people. Don't engage with those who say, oh, we originally from America. We all know they're crazy. We all know that. So don't interact with them. But y'all need to understand that African American is our own culture. It's our own ethnicity. We are here in America. We are black. No, we're not saying we're originally from America because we know we African.
Completely forgot where they came from.
That's funny because, like, you have nothing else to talk about but us. Meanwhile, your homeland is falling apart. Your country, literally in shambles. Economics in shambles. Food, shambles. Food safety, shambles. Your people, poor. No hope. I don't understand why you worrying about us when you got bigger fish to fry. Don't complain at us. The palm color people are doing that. Your cousin doing that to your people. Don't worry about us. Worry about your starving people at home.
Your history before saying I'm African American.
Every few months, one of you spineless bastards like to walk up to the Diaspora tree and shake it to see if you can get a few thousand followers from one of its fruits. And y'all methods are downright disrespectful, diabolical, and y'all's tones tend to be condescending and ignorant. So let me give those of you that think like this man a quick history lesson. The continent of Africa was divided up evenly amongst the European nations at the time. They were conquered and pillaged of their resources and their people, save for a few nations like Ethiopia. Some of you with any amount of geographical history know that the way Africa is divided up now is not how it was divided prior to its exploration by European nations of the time, thus starting the very systematic and brutal extraction of Africa that lasts to this current day, which we all on a global scale, everyone a part of the diaspora, can feel the effects of. Each one of our experiences of groups of people is different. My experience as an African American is going to be different from somebody of the Caribbean, or from somebody from South Africa, of somebody from the UK, and the people that still live in Africa today. Now, every nation after slavery dealt with their diasporic peoples in a similar way, different forms of apartheid, different forms of Jim Crow, racist systems that systematically oppressed them, kept them at the lower tiers of society, prevented them from accessing wealth, prevented them access to their own heritage. Now, some of us are luckier than others. Some of us can look back and have a well kept together bits of history of our heritage to be like, okay, my people came from here, my people came from here, right? The furthest I've been able to go back is 5 generations to a 70-year-old woman that entered into Baltimore, Maryland in the early 1800s as a slave. And that's just one of my great-greats. Now, speaking on the experience of us in African America and America trying to trace our ancestry back, a lot of our records are in people's basements, being passed down from generation to generation to generation. A lot of our information isn't even public record. I was only able to find most of my family history because they were mulatto, mixed with white. So therefore their records were kept well. So even my experience isn't going to be the same as the next African American when they try to go back and trace their lineage.
Thick, because this...
I think the only person confused here is you, babe. You. It's crazy how us African Americans, we really be out here minding our own black ass business, just trying to survive. We're only trying to survive. And here y'all go, trying to belittle and berate us for I don't know what reason. Y'all be doing it out the blue. Dude really sat up there and said, maybe you need to do some research on your history before you say you're African American. No. Maybe you need to do research on U.S. history before you try to come at us for not knowing where the fuck we come from. Dude sitting there talking about I asked this guy and he said, where is he from? He said, Atlanta, Georgia. I said, where are your parents from? He said, Atlanta, Georgia. I said, where are your grandparents from? He said, Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah, bro. Because that's all we can trace our ancestry back to is the Americas. What are you talking about? We don't know how to trace our ancestry back to Africa. We wish we could, but we can't. And y'all know we can't. That is why African Americans literally had to become their own people with their own culture and their own everything, because we didn't know shit. Because when the man came over and took our ancestors, they made sure that they erased anything and everything so we can trace our ass back to that. We can't. They depleted it all. You talking about I can tell what type of African you're from just by looking at you. Great. That's good for you. That's great. Tell us then. Tell us. Let us know. Let us know. I'll be using that I know where my ancestors come from in Africa. Y'all be using that shit way too much. Y'all be taking that shit overboard. Cause good for you. Like I said, we wish we could. We just can't. Okay, so we have to become proud to be something else because we did not know where we started from. Like, what are you really trying to say? You're trying to say that we're not African? Are you trying to say we're not American? Because we're both. We're both. I'm finna end on this note. Y'all really need to just leave us the fuck alone.
So watching all those stitches, I can only imagine the amount of frustration, how exhausting it must be for African Americans to always have to come across videos like this of, one black person coming to tell them, oh, why are you guys still talking about slavery? Why do you guys demand reparations? Or talking about how African Americans are hypocrites, just like in this other video. You guys check out that video. Or talking about why don't African Americans know where they are from, just like in this other video, which is also the topic in today's video as well. So I can imagine how frustrating it is for them to always have to see the same talking points recycled, the same level of ignorance recycled over and over again, and how exhausting it must be having to explain the same thing. And it makes makes me wonder, because I see a lot of people talk about how the American educational system is failing and how they're not really teaching people about history. But it makes me wonder the state of the educational system in Europe. Like, how ignorant can you be? Even if you were not taught that in school, all you need do is a simple Google search. And from what this guy said, obviously he knows about slavery, because he said that African Americans are descendants of slaves. So if you know about slavery, how is it so hard for you to do the math? Bro, do the math. Figure it out. If they were brought all the way from Africa over 400 years ago, they had to mix with each other because it was people from different tribes in Africa. So the average African American has like a cocktail of different African tribes and countries that they can trace their lineage to. And not everybody has even done the whole genealogy, DNA thing to even figure out where they are from, because as I learned, it is really expensive to do. So hypothetically, if an African American has done their genealogy stroke DNA test and they can trace their lineage down to, let's say, 6-7 tribes in Africa. So brother, when you ask him that question, where are your parents from, where are you from, which of the 6 or 7 tribes do you expect him to reply to you that he's from? Do you see how this doesn't make sense? It is impossible for them to trace themselves back to one particular country or to one particular region or to one particular tribe. And we also cannot ignore the fact that a lot of them are mixed with something else other than black. Some of them have European, some of them have indigenous American DNA as well. So what do you expect as a reply when you ask these people which African country they come from? Like, it is not that hard to figure out how that is a pointless question. Now, I give it to this guy, he's actually young, but his age is not an excuse if you ask me, because he's old enough to actually know. You're embarrassing us out here, bro. Come on. You're confused, and your confusion is confusing us, because now we know that you're confused, and some people could also be getting confused listening to you because you're obviously confused and you need to educate yourself. Now, to express an unpopular opinion, from what this guy said, as much as it is offensive, I think people that think like this and say this do it because they see us as one people. So regardless of the fact that African Americans are in America, we still see them as Africans. So we expect them to still identify as Africans and probably, claim one particular African country. But it is dangerous because there's the ignorance of them refusing to acknowledge that African Americans have been removed from the continent over generations, and they have a very different experience and history from the rest of the people in the diaspora, specifically Africans. And because of this, they have been able to build a different culture, making them their own ethnicity. So even if we see them as a part of us and an extension of ourselves as Africans and expect them to identify as Africans, we cannot disregard the years that their ancestors have spent in America and the identity that they have developed for themselves as African Americans. It would be unfair for us to do that. It's almost like asking them to pick or choose between being African or being American, but they are actually a combination of both at this point. They've developed a different culture that is very different from what we have here in Africa, but of course it still has some elements, a lot of elements that can be traced to their African roots and ancestry. Which is why at this point, I have to say it, let African Americans be, let every African descendant of slavery in whichever part of the world be. Stop quizzing them about where in Africa they come from. The most important thing is, do they accept that they have African heritage? Yes. Do they recognize their history of their ancestors and ancestry and how they trace back to Africa? Yes, that is the most important thing. We should not be so concerned about the fact that, they cannot trace themselves back to any specific African country or they've lost their African culture. At this point, that is where it begins to leave the threshold of brotherhood to become something that is just plain provoking. It begins to look like we are poking these people and looking for a reaction out of them. How many times do African Americans have to explain to the rest of the diaspora why they cannot trace their heritage back to a specific African country? At this point, I am getting tired of seeing videos like this, and I'm sure that every African American is too. And on the other hand, I really want to know what you guys think. If you're a black person, a black British person, please let me know, what exactly is the educational system? Why does this seem to be happening a lot with a lot of black people in Britain making all this kind of videos with very wrong and misinformed and ignorant takes like this? starting up a lot of all these diaspora war conversations that we usually have. What is the issue? What is going on? Is it something in the water, or is it just the lack of proper education, or is it some form of brainwashing? Where is the ignorance coming from? I'm very curious to know. You guys let me know in the comment section. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop your opinion, and then we'll have a conversation. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.